Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar. It is on prepping PDFs for accessibility. My name is Vijayashree Vethantam. I go by VJ, and I'm Senior Vice President, Growth and Strategy with Continual Engine. I'm joining you today from Chicago, and it is my absolute pleasure to be hosting and moderating today's session with Sarah Stricker. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. We have enabled live transcription on today's webinar, and we're also recording the session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel or raise your hand. To avoid any interruptions to the flow of the session, we're going to bring up the questions midway through the session as well as towards the end. We're going to have some time that we can save for people to unmute themselves and then be able to speak. And as I mentioned at the start of the presentation today, we will be sharing an accessible version of today's presentation, along with a copy of the recording with everyone who registered. And so here's a brief introduction about my organization. Continual Engine is an award-winning AI technology company. We're dedicated to building smarter, affordable, scalable solutions for learning and accessibility. Our solutions are especially impactful in making digital content equitable and accessible for all individuals, while also making them WCAG compliant. We have been doing this for about 7 years now, and we achieve this by leveraging sophisticated technologies such as generative AI, deep learning, machine learning, automation, and more in collaboration with human experts, such as subject matter experts and accessibility experts. As I mentioned, my name is Vijayashree Vethantam. I go by VJ. I'm Senior Vice President, Growth and Strategy with Continual Engine. I have a couple of decades of experience working in higher education, learning, and accessibility in the role of sales and account management. And then over the last few years, I've been excited to explore the potential of technology and innovation in making digital content and learning experiences more affordable, equitable, and widely available to all individuals. And with that, I'm excited to be welcoming back Sarah Stricker. Sarah was our guest speaker at the All About WCAG webinar that we hosted earlier this year. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us again. I'm going to hand it off to you for introductions.
Thank you, Vijay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Stricker. I'm an instructional technologist at ansrsource. I lead a team of e-learning developers, and I consult on educational technology solutions, which have increasingly focused on accessibility. I've worked in and with higher education teams for over 10 years. I hold a master's degree in communication studies, and I am a web accessibility specialist certified by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. I can also tell you a little bit about ansrsource.
Oh, I think, Sarah, we might have a question. So I'm just going to see. April, do you want to ask a question? Just going to find you. Or if you want to type it out on chat, that's fine too. Yes, April.
We're having trouble seeing the PowerPoint. It's stick between two different slides at the same time.
I see. Okay, let me stop sharing and then retry. Sometimes that can fix it. Thank you for letting me know.
No problem.
Okay, let me try this again. My apologies. This is the interesting part about technology. You don't expect it to work exactly as it's planned. Okay, here we are. Can I confirm if everyone's able to see the slide? Yes.
That looks better now.
Okay, fantastic.
All right. Thank you, April. So Vijay, can you move it to the next slide?
Yes.
I'll talk a little bit about ansrsource. ansrsource partners with educational institutions, business enterprises, nonprofits, and educational publishers to design and create learning content and learning solutions. So this could be a course or program design and implementation. It could be custom tools or educational games. We also take care of accessibility remediation. So if you're seeking WCAG or 508 compliance in your courses, in your online courses, consider partnering with ansrsource. So ansrsource has a wealth of expertise in pedagogy and educational technology, and we're really great at producing quality solutions quickly and at scale.
Okay, and then I'm going to briefly talk about today's webinar. Today's webinar is titled Prepping PDFs for Accessibility. So Sarah today will be presenting insights on designing visually appealing and reader-friendly PDFs. The focus of today's webinar is to correctly prepare a document for PDF accessibility using clear design, proper labels, text alternatives, and automated testing tools that are available. So our goal for the webinar is to inform participants about the importance of designing accessibility prior to saving documents as a PDF. And by making this choice, it's just you are promoting accessibility and then making sure that we are bringing in inclusivity for all individuals. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Sarah, to walk us through the session topics and then share best practices on PDF accessibility.
Thanks, Vijay. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to my device, and that might actually help with the slide progression. Let's see. Vijay, does that look correct? Is that showing the title slide there?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
seeing the first slide.
All right, so I'll get to our place. How's it transitioning as I'm going?
Yeah, to me, it looks good, but I want to confirm.
Great.
That's much better now, Sarah.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks everyone for your for catching that early, especially. So for our session topics today, this will be a basic introduction to PDF accessibility. We'll focus on how to prepare your source documents for PDF accessibility before you turn your document into a PDF, and we'll briefly touch on some accessibility testing and remediation basics. So what is a PDF and why is it kind of difficult to address accessibility in PDFs? So PDF stands for Portable Document Format. It's a relatively old format, but PDFs are still a really popular way to share files online. The benefit of the PDF format is that it generally will look the same regardless of which device or software is used to open the PDF. It keeps the same visual format, which is convenient for printing. PDFs are also a relatively secure way to send information. They enable security features like encryption, password protection, and digital signatures. You'll often see PDFs used in banking or legal contracts for these reasons. When PDF technology was developed in the early 1990s, the focus was still largely on printed material, both as an endpoint to print out documents on paper and as input. PDFs became an efficient way to digitize paper documents. But the advantage of the PDF has become the essential challenge for accessibility in our current day. The focus on a consistent appearance means that a PDF often can't be interpreted by devices like screen readers or keyboards. So these devices need to be able to read all the visual information as text. If content is coded as an image without a text description, it becomes invisible to users who can't rely on sight. Because of these challenges, always consider if a PDF is the best option for your document. For the purposes of usability, consider alternatives like HTML or Word document if it's an option for your situation. However, there are several options available to ensure that your PDFs are in fact accessible, and educating yourself on these options will enable you to create and remediate accessible PDFs. So what do we mean by accessibility in PDFs? Accessible PDFs are constructed in a way that can be interpreted, used, and understood by users with disabilities. In practice, there are several steps to follow. We'll go through some of these steps in this webinar. The official standard for PDF accessibility is known as PDF UA. The UA stands for Universal Access. This is a technical standard developed and maintained by the PDF Association. You can find the details of this standard on the PDF Association website, which is pdfa.org. It includes really detailed instructions on standards for tagging, but be aware this is an extensive technical standard. In principle, the PDF UA standard aligns with the WCAG 2.1 guidelines. We won't go into depth into the web content accessibility guidelines or WCAG in this webinar, but if you are familiar with WCAG, you will see the overlap in the accessibility tips we talk about today and WCAG. In short, though, WCAG are organized around 4 principles for digital accessibility. These principles state that for all users, especially users with disabilities, digital content should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Robust meaning compatible across multiple devices. Over the course of the next few minutes, I'll talk about how to construct a document that applies these principles. The focus on this discussion will be on creating documents, but can be also useful if you're remediating an existing document. We'll start by discussing tips that are applicable in any content creation tool, and then look at how these can be specifically applied in Microsoft Word. I'll also provide some tips for PowerPoint and Google Docs. In Microsoft Word, we'll be looking at a document with headings, text, images, and a table. We won't be going into depth about forms or interactive elements or detailed coverage of tagging in a PDF editor. However, if you prepare your document in a content authoring tool using the tips that we discuss, you will have addressed many of the accessibility issues that might arise once you run that accessibility checker on your final PDF document. I'll categorize how to prepare a document for accessibility with 4 broad steps. These steps are 1, clear and simple design, 2, adding labels, 3, text alternatives, and 4, some final steps. Each of these steps works toward the goal of a document that can be navigated and read with assistive devices like a screen reader. Let's begin by focusing on clarity and simplicity in your document design. In your layout, avoid multiple columns, tables, or text box callouts. This is more of a recommendation than a requirement. It's fine to have some of these elements in your document. Just understand that the more elements like this that you have in your document, the more complicated the tagging will be, and the more likely you are to have to fix reading order errors in your PDF. Also, only use tables to display data and not as a design tool. Design your document to be read logically from top to bottom if you can. And depending on the style of your document, use appropriate headings and subheadings. Images are easiest to work with when they're kept in line with the text, so use that option when possible. So to design your document, use the formatting tools available in your content authoring tools to indicate new paragraphs, tabs, and text alignment. For instance, when creating line spacing between paragraphs, it's preferable to use the paragraph styling options that are within the program instead of trying to manually insert blank lines using the return or the enter key. Adding visual formatting through excessive use of the return key, the tab key, or multiple blank spaces with the space bar, these are called white space characters, that can create confusion for screen readers or keyboard navigators. Next, let's consider the text itself. Make sure that all your text is formatted as actual text and not embedded with an image file. If necessary, use OCR technology. OCR stands for optical character recognition. OCR is used to extract text from an image. Displaying text as text outside of the image is critical for the readability and accessibility of your document. Also, fonts, use clear and accessible and legible fonts. So what's a clear or legible font? In general, an accessible font is a commonly used font that has a balanced and clear design. This can include both popular sans serif and serif fonts. Accessible sans serif fonts include Arial, Verdana, and Helvetica. And accessible serif fonts include Times New Roman and Georgia. There is a common accessible best practice, which is to use serif fonts for headings and sans serif fonts for body text. But overall, don't use too many fonts. Stick to 2 or 3 at the most. Also, check out the space around your text. Avoid justifying the text. A line height of about 1.5 times the font size is recommended. Paragraphs should have some additional space between them, about twice the font size. Finally, for a clear design, be strategic about using color. Don't use color ever as the sole means of conveying information. And the color of the text should have at least a 4.5:1 contrast ratio with its background. All large text and color graphics and UI elements like buttons should have at least a 3:1 contrast ratio with their background. So by incorporating these design considerations, you make your document more readable, especially for assistive devices. You'll also facilitate proper tagging in your PDF reader. Having a clear visual layout is an important first step to prepare your document for accessibility, but you may need to provide the content creation tool with extra information to be readable to a screen reader or other assistive devices. So you'll want to attach programmatic labels to the elements in your document. For example, your headings should be tagged as headings and labeled hierarchically. Your title is your first heading. So label that heading 1 or H1. There usually is only one H1 in the document. Your main subheadings will be heading 2s and subheadings will be heading 3s and so on. The method for labeling headings and other elements will be different according to the program you're working with, but most content authoring tools have style formatting settings that allow you to label and edit headings. Keep in mind that the program may have default style settings for different kinds of headings, but you can usually change those settings. However, when you do change the visual settings, make sure that the headings still keep that programmatic label. Many programs, including Microsoft Word and Google Docs, provide a navigation or outline view that allows you to see how the headings are labeled in your document. You can use this feature to review your heading structure. In addition to headings, there are other elements that you should label. If your document contains tables, make sure to label your header row. This is crucial for assistive devices to interpret tabular data correctly. Also, any images should be labeled. Graphics, photos, and infographics that convey meaning should absolutely be labeled with alternative text. But you'll also want to label any decorative visual elements as decorative, if the program allows you to do so. In some cases, if alt text isn't added on an image by you, the program will add default alt text that includes the image file name or an AI-produced alt text. So you want to check on each image and how it's labeled and then correct as needed. Hyperlinks should also be appropriately labeled. Hyperlinks should have a descriptive name, avoiding vague hyperlink text such as click here. So consider that some screen reader users are going to be browsing through the links of a document as a list of all the hyperlinks. So they should be able to tell where those links are going to outside of the context of their placement in your document. There are other elements that you may be able to label programmatically in your document, and depending on your content creation tool, you should use these labeling tools as much as you can, since they'll provide information on how to tag the elements to the PDF reader. Things like lists, form fields, buttons, videos, equations like math equations, and like code and computer code, among other elements. Finally, label your document itself by adding metadata. Your program should allow you to add at least a title and potentially even an author, language, the date, and other information about the document to the file. That metadata won't appear in your document, but it can be used by reading devices to communicate information about it. Adding the title of a Word document, for instance, ensures that that title appears in Adobe Acrobat Reader in the window above the document content, and then it's read by the screen reader. If that title isn't there in the metadata, then what's read in that space is the file name, which can sometimes be confusing. Okay, so we've discussed using a clear design and labeling document elements. An additional step for accessibility that you'll want to complete prior to saving your document as a PDF is to check for any areas that you will need to add additional text description to. Any non-text content will need a text equivalent for the document to be accessible. For many images and elements, the alt text or programmatic labels may be sufficient as a description, but for some elements, additional text description is going to be needed. For example, any audio-only elements will need a transcript. A video might also need a transcript file. If there are tables, graphs, or infographics in the document, you may want to add a long description, either through attaching an additional document or editing your content to thoroughly explain that chart or that infographic, for instance. Okay, so let's move on to the final steps of preparing your document as an accessible PDF. At this point, you have already incorporated accessibility into the format, the style, and the content of your document. And you should also utilize the automated accessibility checkers that are available in your software. So Word offers a useful accessibility checker, and other programs also offer similar testing features. Make the most of those tools to identify and address any remaining accessibility issues before exporting your document as a PDF. After you've addressed all those accessibility issues, you may want to templatize your document to preserve things like heading, styling, and decorative elements. By saving your accessible settings as a template, you can save valuable time in the future and increase the likelihood of consistently creating accessible documents. Okay, so to export or save your document as a PDF, there are many options available depending on your content creation tool. You will want to use the method that preserves the document structure, tagging, and metadata that you have built into the document. So look at your save options. We'll talk about some of them in Word in a few minutes, but in general, you want to avoid using the print option to initiate the save process, as that tends to save settings for visual formatting only and can remove your accessibility labels. So once you've saved successfully, you can open your document in a PDF viewer and finally test that final format. All right, so we've covered a lot so far. It can be tricky to understand it until you actually work in a content authoring tool. So I'm going to do a broad overview demonstration of some of the methods that we've discussed using Microsoft Word. I'll also point out a few features of Google Docs, PowerPoint, and Google Slides that you may find helpful. The demos that I'm doing are in Microsoft 365 on a PC. So first, to format text as a heading 1 in Word, first go to highlight the text, then go to the Home menu and choose heading 1 in the Styles group. And your highlighted text is now formatted as a heading level 1. The keyboard shortcut for this is to highlight the text, then press Alt, then H, then L. And here's a close-up of that menu option showing the home menu open and the heading 1 style highlighted. So what if you don't want to use the default styling for headers in Word? Or what if you already have headers designed in your document, but they're not labeled as headers in your program? Well, you can change the default styles in Word by highlighting the text that is styled in the way you want to change the heading, then head to the styles group in the home menu and expand the styles menu, which I have a screenshot of here. Hover over the respective heading type. In this case, we're doing heading 2, and choose update heading 2 to match selection. The keyboard shortcuts for this feature are Alt, then H, then FY, which will open the styles menu. Note that there's similar functionality in Google Docs to label and format headings and other elements. Once your headings are labeled, you'll be able to see the nested hierarchy of your document via the navigation pane. To access the navigation pane, go to the View menu and check the navigation pane option in the Show group. The keyboard shortcuts for that are Alt, then W, then K. At that point, the navigation pane will slide out and you'll be able to interact with it to see the organization of your document. So here's a close-up of that. We see the navigation pane checked and expanded, and then that navigation pane is on the left. Note that in Google Docs, you can do this same feature. It's called Document Outline. And in PowerPoint, you can open the outline view in the View menu or open the reading order pane in the Accessibility menu. All right, now let's look at tables. You'll want to label the header row of your table to pass the accessibility checker. It's also a good idea to repeat the header row onto each page if the table rows extend to a new page. To do this, highlight the header row of your table. In the Table Design menu, check the header row in the Table Style Options group. Then in the Layout menu, select Repeat Header Rows in the Data group. And here's a close-up of those options. The keyboard shortcuts are Alt, then JT, then A to note a header row, and Alt, then JL, then J to repeat header rows. In Google Docs, you can find a similar option in the table properties by pinning your header row. It's so important to add alternative text to all of your images. Even decorative images need to be reviewed and marked as decorative. To do that, select your image in the document, then select the alt text item in the picture format menu, and mouse users can also right-click to access the alt text menu. The alt text menu will open and you can enter your alt text or mark the image as decorative. The keyboard path to get here is Alt, then JP, then AT. And here's a close-up of that menu. Now you see the picture format menu open and the accessibility alt text button highlighted. Note that you can add alt text in most content authoring tools, including Google Docs, PowerPoint, and Google Slides. Even like Instagram allows you to add alt text to images, but be aware that the capacity for marking images as decorative is limited. So if you can't mark the image as decorative, my recommendation is to add the alt text to the image anyway, and then when it reaches its final destination as a PDF, you can make the decision to keep the alt text or to tag it as an artifact, which hides it from screen readers. The last thing I'm going to demo in the content of the document is how to add a hyperlink. I find that the fastest way to do this is to highlight the hyperlink text and use keyboard shortcut Control plus K. You can also do this by going to the Insert menu and choosing Link in the Links group. The hyperlink window will open, which allows you to add your URL. Be sure to review the text to display and make sure that's correct. Choose OK and test your link in the document. You'll find that you can use Control plus K to insert a hyperlink in almost all content authoring tools. So to finish up, we'll look at how to run the accessibility checker save a template, add metadata to your document, and finally save as a PDF. But before we do that, I want to take a quick break for questions and to get a sip of water.
Thanks, Sarah. Lorna, I had a question. Is it possible to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and recording of the presentation? Yes, we are actually going to send that out to everyone who's registered and everyone who's attending. So yes, you will certainly get a copy. And are there other questions? Of course.
I'll also note, if you have some detailed questions that you might want to spend more time on it and not bring up live in this webinar, you can send an email to contact@continualengine.com.
And we'll also have that information in the presentation we're going to be sharing following this webinar. So you could certainly email us if you'd like to kind of dive in deeper into any of the topics. We'll give it a couple more seconds and otherwise just continue. We'll certainly have time towards the end of the webinar. If there are questions, we can bring it up then too. Okay, Sarah, why don't we continue?
Great, let's keep going. So now let's talk about how to find the accessibility checker in Word. So definitely use this tool before you save as a PDF. To open the accessibility checker, choose Check Accessibility in the review menu and do your best to resolve any issues before you save the doc as a PDF. And here's a close-up of these options. You can see the review menu open with the Check Accessibility button highlighted. And the keyboard shortcut to get here is to press Alt, then R, then A1. I know that one thing that prevents us from adding accessibly formatted documents is lack of time. But you can save time by saving your style settings as a template in Word. So let's look at how to do that. First, you need to have your Word document saved on your device, so not in the browser, not like online. Then open the file menu and choose Save As. Look at the input field where you enter your file name. Expand the menu under that field to choose the file type, and you'll select the Word template .x file type. And I think I have this. So, so you can see in that document, you choose the template option, the Word template .x file type. So name your template and then choose Save. And that file as a template is now saved on your device. So the keyboard shortcuts to get here are Alt, then F, then A, then Y3. And here is a close-up of those options. We have the Save As button highlighted, and then you can see the field where you choose your document type, which is that Word template document type, and then you can enter a title for that.
Sarah, there are two questions, and I just wanted to bring these up if they are timely. One is, can you show us a demo of reference and footnotes? That's one question.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is.
Sure. I'm not going to do that in this webinar because these are pretty like set little demos that we have set up here, and I'm not actually in Word right now. But if you send an email, I can walk you through how to do that.
Yes, or if you'd like to leave us your information, we can email you as well with more details. Yeah. And then the other one is, when using auto tag in Acrobat, pages are tagged as figure. So the auto tag is not properly tagging. Any suggestions on how to fix or avoid this issue?
Well, again, that's a little bit out of scope of this webinar, but if you send that as a question, we can look at those options for you.
Vivian, I would be happy to take this offline and get back to you if you would be comfortable leaving your email ID. We will be sure to respond.
All right.
Yeah, and those were the
So-
two.
Okay. Right. So let's talk a little bit more about how to use the style template for a new document. Then when you open a new document, look for the personal or custom tab where you usually see the templates displayed, and you'll see your custom template there. And the keyboard shortcut to get here is Alt and then N and then Y2. So what if you want to apply a template to an existing document? That's a little bit more complicated, but it's completely achievable. And I want to show you how to do that now. So with your existing document open, go to the File menu and choose Options. In the Word Options menu that appears, open up the add-ins and find the Manage field at the bottom. You'll expand that menu next to Manage and select Templates in the Manage options, and then select Go. Then you'll have the option to attach next to the document template field. So click Attach and find the template file in your device and open it. So that will populate the file path of that template document. Be sure to check automatically update document styles so that it will update in your document, and then OK. So the document template styles will now be applied. Note that it will only apply the styles if your elements are labeled. So that is to say, it will only apply like a heading 1 styling to text that is labeled heading 1, for example. The options for templates in other programs like Google Suite and PowerPoint vary. If you put in the effort to add accessible styling, I do encourage you to save those style options in any means that are available to you to make it convenient for yourself and for your team to continue to follow those accessible design practices. All right. So metadata, you'll want to add metadata to your file to communicate important information about the document to the PDF reader, as we talked about earlier. And here's how to do that in Word. In the File menu, open the Info panel and hover over the different input fields to enter the text for those fields that are on the right there. With a keyboard, you can get there using Alt, then F, then I, and then S. So finally, we're ready to save as a PDF. Regardless of which program you're using, you want to preserve as much of the formatting as possible. Here's how to do that in Word. In the File menu, choose Export. Then click this option here to create a PDF/XPS. Then a menu will pop up and you want to click the Options button, because you want to make sure that all the non-printing options are checked. These include create bookmarks using headings, document properties, and document structure tags for accessibility. So make sure all of those options are checked. Then choose OK and save as usual. To use a keyboard to get here, you can press Alt, then F, then E, and A. All right, so testing and remediation. Once you have successfully created a well-structured and labeled PDF, you have taken significant steps towards addressing accessibility concerns. However, it's essential to thoroughly test that PDF in its final format to identify and resolve any remaining issues. Although we won't delve into the details of remediation in this webinar, it's really important to familiarize yourself with those key methods for evaluating any PDF document. First, make sure you can navigate the PDF using only a keyboard in a reading order that makes sense. Test the functionality of all the links, buttons, and interactive elements without relying on a mouse or other pointing device. Pay particular attention to any areas where your keyboard navigation gets trapped, that doesn't hinder the navigation. Next, read the document using a screen reader. Both Mac and PC desktops offer built-in screen readers accessible through the accessibility settings. That's VoiceOver for Mac and Narrator for PC. Another option is NVDA, which is a free screen reader available for PC. Confirm that the reading order aligns with how a sighted person would read the document, and verify that the screen reader can access all the non-text elements and that the alternative text provides meaningful descriptions. Finally, if you have access to an automated accessibility checker, run the checker to identify any issues. Adobe Acrobat Pro includes an accessibility checker, as does the prep tool available from Continual Engine. Address any flagged accessibility concerns based on the results generated by the checker. Now, as that question earlier kind of brought up, PDFs vary in complexity, and PDF tagging can be a really time-intensive and complicated process. So do consider hiring a remediation expert if you need that. However, if you have followed the steps we've gone over today, prior to setting up your document with accessibility in mind, you will have taken care of many of the issues that can come up in PDF remediation. Certainly, there may be work to do in the PDF itself, but you're well on your way to addressing most of those issues.
Thanks, Sarah. And I want to take a moment to briefly talk about how we can help support some of your accessibility needs. So we are an AI technology company. We are focused on accessibility and learning. We have a suite of solutions that we leverage in a way to provide more scalable and affordable services. We also do offer cloud-based subscriptions for several of these. And I just want to go over some options for you to consider if you are looking at, how can automation, how can AI make this process of remediation a lot faster. We have Invicta, which automates creation of high quality alt text for images. We have Prep that Sarah just mentioned. It's an AI-enabled PDF and document remediation tool. In addition, we also do provide video closed captions and audio description services, and we also help with document accessibility for Word and PowerPoint. Anything that is interesting to you here, if you'd like to learn more, please contact me at continualengine.com. With that, we just want to go into a couple of resources. And I think we also have some time for Q&A before that. We have a question from Karen, which says, how would you approach training to become a document remediator? Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that, on any recommendations?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it depends on where you're starting from, but I would, there are lots of ways to educate yourself about digital accessibility broadly, and I would definitely start there. I ended up becoming a web accessibility specialist through IAAP, which I thought was a really beneficial process to learn a lot about digital accessibility. But then there are other organizations that are focused specifically on PDFs. So I would check out that pdfa.org for to kind of start your search there.
So is it pdfa.org?
It is. And in fact, I'll bring up this additional resources slide that everyone will get as part of the webinar slides. That it's the pdfa.org is the PDF Association site. I also put up here a good free contrast checker, color contrast checker, and WebAIM's PDF accessibility guide, which is a really great overview of some of the things we talked about today.
And then, Sarah, we have one more question, which is, can you share more about the reading order and why it doesn't always work as expected? There are times when drag and drop jumbles the order. Do you have any thoughts around that?
I think that there can be a lot of things that happen in that space between saving as like a Word doc, for instance, and then Adobe Acrobat Reader picking up that information. And it depends on how well they're talking to each other, can depend on like the version that you're using. So I can't say specifically, why that thing is happening. I would say that make sure that all of the versions of the tools you're using are as up to date as they can be, so that they're addressing any known bugs. For instance, I've heard recently that alt text from Word isn't coming through to the Adobe Acrobat Reader as well. So if you're taking care of that, like very recently, you should probably check on that alt text in Adobe even after you have added it in Word, because sometimes they don't talk to each other as well. And that's another reason why I think if there are a lot of advantages to using the PDF format. However, if those advantages aren't useful, if you don't really need to use a PDF, think of other formats like using an HTML format, or just sending it as a Word document or like an open source document. There are other formats available that I think we don't think of, because sometimes our impulse is just to create the PDF because we know it will be visually consistent. But let's think a little bit further about other options when we can.
Thank you. Did that answer the question? Are there any follow-ups to that? Okay, while we wait, I want to see if there are other questions or if anyone has thoughts. If anyone would like to speak up, we do have a few minutes left. We kind of went over our material a little bit earlier, so we are happy to stick around and answer any other questions. No follow-up. Okay, great. So you can certainly reach out to us on contact@continualengine.com if there are more questions. And if anyone would like additional information about what we presented today, we are happy to take suggestions for future webinar topics. And I think we have one question from Michelle Scott. When using auto tag in Acrobat, pages are tagged as figure, so the auto tag is not properly tagging. Any suggestions on how to fix or avoid this issue? Usually that means you need to run OCR.
Yeah, and Vijay, I think that's maybe the same question that we had earlier.
I think so. Yeah. Yes. Okay, got it. Thanks, Michelle. Our documents sometimes have many different paragraph styles. I'm finding there is only one when we pass it through the accessibility process. Any way around that?
Well, I know that you can create different styles in Word, and you can create different tags in Acrobat, but I'm not sure how they talk to each other, for those styles. So I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
We could look into this, Marina, and probably see if we can get back to you with more information.
Yeah.
And I just took down your name, and if you've registered, we'll certainly be able to get back to you with another response. We use InDesign and Acrobat Pro. Okay. Thank you. And I think that's everyone so far. Well, when I export from a Mac PowerPoint to Acrobat, all structure tags are lost. When I export from a PC, all structure is there. Do you know why? This is from Charlie's Bedford.
You know, I'm not sure why that would be. Again, there is some unpredictability with how the tags carry through to the PDF reader sometimes. So yeah, definitely important to check that tagging structure in the PDF itself.
All right, I hope that provided some insight. And let's see if there are more questions. I think there's a lot of material to cover on this topic, and we certainly our intention is to continue. This is more like an introduction to the topic. We want to have future sessions that's focused a little bit more on remediating PDFs, and then, you know, looking at probably taking things from one format to another. So we can certainly dive a little bit deeper into those topics in the future. And again, if you have suggestions around what you'd like us to cover, we welcome that. But otherwise, we are grateful for everyone who was able to join. Thank you all so much. Please reach out to us again on contact@continualengine.com. We'll send a copy of today's recording as well as a copy of the presentation, and you'll have that for your reference. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.